Powered by the Montana Television Network. This is the 10 o'clock news on Q2, Montana's news leader.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us on your Friday. I'm Jeanelle Slade.
And I'm Russ Reesiger. Warm up overnight and for the start of your weekend may help you ease into the frigid cold come next week.
Here's a live look from the Q2 iCam this Friday night. Enjoy the clear skies and slightly warmer temperatures for now as the Arctic cold makes its way into our region.
Q2 Chief Forecaster Bob McGuire joining us now. Bob, it appears tonight is an exception to the rule.
Yes, for the short term. Right now, let's check the Doppler radar. We do see some snow coming close to us. Look at that. Just up in the next county up over there. So that's what we got over there, moving into Muscle County. So we got some light snow moving in right now. But let me show you what's going to happen. Things are going to be kind of different for a change tonight. Look what's going to happen. We are going to warm up 24 degrees by about 11 o'clock, 28 degrees by 3 o'clock. It'll be about 28 by 8 o'clock in the morning, up to 35 degrees by about 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Then after that, things start to cool down. But look what's going to happen. We'll end up Saturday's high 36 degrees. And then on Sunday, here comes that cold Arctic air mass and things start dropping down. The high temperature on Tuesday and Wednesday both will be sub-zero and back up to 9 degrees by the time Thursday gets here. We'll have more in your forecast coming up in just a few more minutes.
All right, thank you, Bob.
Well, gruesome details emerged surrounding the death of a Billings woman on New Year's Day.
Court documents now show a 70-year-old Billings man assaulted his 72-year-old wife with a hammer before he crashed his vehicle with her inside in an attempt to cover up the crime. Now, before he took his own life in jail, Daniel Shine admitted he struck Celia Shine multiple times with a hammer at their home on New Year's Eve, trying to kill her. Shine told police that he placed her in the vehicle and drove around for more than an hour, then crashed into a power pole on Molt Road to try and cover up the murder.
The detectives believe Celia Shine was still alive when she was placed in the vehicle, but died before the crash. Daniel Shine was arrested the following day and committed suicide in the Yellowstone County Jail 2 days later before his first court appearance.
Montana's full legislature meets in regular session only in odd-numbered non-election years when it sets the state budget and deals with other policy matters. But next week, most of the legislature will head to Helena for a special set of big-picture policy meetings. MTN's chief political reporter Mike Dennison tells us why and what to expect.
It's called Legislative Week, and while lawmakers are required to attend, most of them are likely to be here at the Capitol. The main subjects are what can or should Montanans expect from their government and what's the best way to pay for it.
We've got to discuss what services we wish for, what services can be provided more efficiently and more effectively, and maybe what services need to be eliminated, and how we plan to pay for this in a manner that is equitably distributed.
It's also billed as a chance for all lawmakers to see emerging budget issues and how they intersect with policy.
I'm thinking of it as an opportunity for budget and policy discussions that a lot of legislators don't otherwise get. If you serve on a finance committee or an appropriations committee, you hardly ever hear about policy, and vice versa. For a lot of us, this is supposed to be more of a melding of those two areas.
At least 3 legislative studies on tax structure and spending are already on tap. Lawmakers and the public will weigh in next week. Another study looks at whether the legislature should meet in annual sessions, but most who spoke with MTN News said that's not the main event next week. However, tax reform for state and local governments is a key subject. Democratic House Minority Leader Casey Schreiner said he hopes Legislative Week isn't just an attempt to build the case for a statewide sales tax. Jones and others say that's not the intent, but some believe property taxpayers are getting overburdened and that something has to give.
And so there needs to be a discussion held. Is this tax structure and the growth we would forecast coming sustainable? Is it equitable? Do we need to hold a discussion of what other alternatives might exist?
Jones says next week is a chance for all lawmakers to examine the data and not just rely on anecdotal evidence. It's also an election year, so along with the big ideas and the looks at long-term policy in Montana, expect some campaign politics next week as well. At the Capitol, Mike Dennison, MTN News.
All right, thanks, Mike. And one more legislative note. After 16 years total in the Montana House and Senate, Senate Minority Leader John Sesso is now retiring.
New developments late tonight out of Iran following an explosion of a passenger jetliner over the country earlier this week. And U.S. officials say the same day Iran's top general was killed in Iraq, a separate American airstrike failed to kill a high-ranking Iranian commander in Yemen. CBS News correspondent Skylar Henry has more from the White House.
Iranian state TV says Iran unintentionally shot down a Ukrainian jetliner on Wednesday, killing all 176 people on board. The report, citing a military statement, blames human error. The incident, which Iran had denied a role in, took place within hours of that country's retaliatory attack on U.S. forces after the death of its top general, Qasem Soleimani. On Friday, CBS News confirmed that the U.S. military also made an unsuccessful attempt to kill a second key figure of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard's Quds Force, its high-ranking commander in Yemen. President Trump discussed details about the threats he says prompted the strike against Soleimani.
We will tell you that probably it was going to be the embassy in Baghdad. I can reveal that I believe it would have been 4 embassies.
But just last night, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the administration did not have precise information about the threat.
We don't know precisely when, and we don't know precisely where, but it was real.
You were mistaken when you said you didn't know precisely when and you didn't know precisely where.
Completely true. Those are completely consistent thoughts. I don't know exactly which minute. We don't know exactly which day it would have been executed, but it was very clear. Qasem Soleimani himself was plotting a broad, large-scale attack against American interests.
The Trump administration revealed details of additional sanctions against Iran that the president announced earlier this week. The sanctions come after Tehran launched more than a dozen ballistic missiles at 2 Iraqi bases housing American and coalition forces. No one was killed in that retaliation for Soleimani's death, and the U.S. did not strike back. But an Iranian commander vowed harsher revenge would come soon. Skyler Henry, CBS News, the White House.
Now, the Trump administration says the new sanctions will target 8 senior Iranian officials involved in destabilizing activities in the Middle East, as well as this week's missile strike.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi intends to send the articles of impeachment to the Senate next week, an announcement that prompted Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to simply say, "About time." House Democrats departing the Capitol today expressed confidence in the Speaker's strategy, while the White House legal team says it's fully prepared for a Senate trial. Senate Democrats say they hope 4 Republicans will cross the aisle and support them on a vote to call witnesses. McConnell says he has the votes to start a trial without settling the question.
Influenza taking a toll on Montana this new year. 405 new cases reported within the first week of 2020. 202 of those right here in Yellowstone County. All but 4 Montana counties reported at least 1 case of the flu. Now, here's some strong reminders from county health experts at Riverstone Health. Stay home when you are sick. Influenza is different than a seasonal cold in that the flu comes on suddenly. And if you have it, you are contagious a day before you show symptoms. So constantly wash your hands and avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth.
Well, every year, thousands of people visit Yellowstone National Park for one simple reason: to see the wolves.
Well, that was made possible 25 years ago when wolves were transported from Canada to the park following one of the most contentious political and environmental battles ever fought in Montana.
MTN's Chet Lehman was there when those wolves arrived, and tonight he brings us an update.
The plan was simple on paper: capture a few packs of gray wolves in Canada, transport them to the United States, and then release them into the wilds of Yellowstone National Park. Remember, wolves roamed there long ago, before man eradicated them from the area in the first part of the 20th century. The Bozeman-based Greater Yellowstone Coalition worked to try to make that happen.
We then helped manage the public debate, which was fierce. Because the wolves had been gone for about 60 years, and most people didn't want them back. And I think most of us didn't understand the complexity of the ecosystem and the impact the wolves could have.
Let's remember, something like reintroducing wolves into Yellowstone National Park hadn't happened before. So for the folks inside the park, this was a new experience as well.
And that was probably the most interesting thing, is watching them throughout the day.
Linda Ferris was in the park 25 years ago.
And how they related to each other.
Assigned as a ranger to help protect the wolves in their acclimatization pens until they could be released.
And to people, you know, when the carcasses were brought in to feed them every 2 weeks, how they reacted to people coming nearby.
Not geysers or grizzly bears. 25 years later, thousands of people come to the park each year to just see wolves on the landscape.
And so that was one of the things we had to try to do, is to educate the public about the benefits of wolves. It's not just that they're predators of livestock, They have a very important role to play in this ecosystem. And so we had to help people understand that, and it's still controversial. It's cooled down some.
Like them or not, the plan authorized in 1991 and set into motion by the Department of the Interior in 1995 worked.
I think so. I think that the purpose of the program to reintroduce the wolves were a success because they have established a population in the area, and they have been removed off of the endangered species list. So there is a viable population in the park today.
In Yellowstone National Park, 25 years ago and today, Chet Lehman, MTN News.
Well, those wolves were trucked into the park on January 12th of 1995 and released in March of that year.
Up next on your 10 o'clock news, 11 Americans and 2 Canadians take the next step to walk on the moon. We'll meet the first graduating class of the Artemis generation.
And in sports, Montana's Dante Olson winning Defensive Player of the Year in the FCS. Scott has details on that and all of the night's highlights.
You're watching MTN News with Jeanelle Slade and Russ Riesinger. Storm Tracker weather with Bob McGuire. And sports with Scott Breen. This is the 10 o'clock news on Q2, Montana's news leader.